Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 276. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about Buddhist temples, great seafood, and animatronics as we go to Southern Taiwan. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have two news stories for you. In the first one, there's a video that has gone viral because a 6-year-old child was patted down by TSA. You know, and I'm not going to be one of the people who's going to get on the bandwagon here and say that this is inappropriate. The pat down was done in a professional fashion. These are the rules. And unfortunately, at this point, if you're uncomfortable with that, you can't fly in the U.S. It doesn't happen that often, but I've seen the video and I didn't see anything inappropriate. And yes, I have had kids. But if you are concerned about traveling with your kids, maybe you should fly Ryanair, because Ryanair is introducing child-free flights in October. Because of complaints about people traveling with small children, the airline is going to be running some flights that have no kids at all. For the links to both those stories, including the video, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome back to the show Michael Soncina, who's come to talk to us about Taiwan. Michael, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Chris, it's a pleasure.
And if you don't remember Michael, he was on the show earlier talking about Hiroshima. But this time, as I said, we're not talking about Japan, but Taiwan. What led you to Taiwan?
Well, it was kind of interesting. About 3 years ago, I was lucky enough to be an exchange student at the National University of Singapore, and we got a long Christmas vacation. And while I was in Singapore, I met many Taiwanese exchange students who were just showering me with praises about their country, and I didn't know much about it. In addition, they had just launched a backpacker program, so I thought, why not see a new country that I've never been to before and try out this backpacker program because I can actually afford it.
And the part of the Taiwan you went to is different than the part we've talked about on the show before. We've talked about Taipei and somewhat also the west coast of Taiwan, but where did you go?
Well, I actually got a train ticket that took me all around the outer edges of the island. So I've been to Taipei, Taichung, Chiayi, Kaohsiung, and Hualien, and then I went back to Taipei. But I'd like to focus on Kaohsiung.
Okay. Which is in the southern part of the island.
It is.
And what can you tell me about Kaohsiung?
Well, I think when the other guest came on the show before, he was talking about Taipei, and Taipei is this very big, burgeoning city. It's kind of like a mini Tokyo, if you've ever been there. A lot of the soft culture is the same. But Kaohsiung is a much smaller city, and I think you should go there when you're at the point of your trip where you need to relax a little bit. And what makes it so nice is that a lot of their sites focus around kind of new takes on old culture. So the sites in Kaohsiung would be the Lotus Pond and the Fengguaishan Temple. And in addition, there's a really nice island near the main city where there's a fish street, and you can try all different sorts of local delicacies.
Okay. And then in a little more detail, you mentioned first the Lotus Pond.
Yeah. The Lotus Pond is essentially in the middle of the city, and it has these 4 really beautiful temples. One is a very old-style temple devoted to Confucius, so it's kind of a traditional temple with incense burning in the front and such. And then there's a spring and autumn pagoda and a dragon and tiger pagoda, and these are kind of new takes on old temples. And you can go inside these temples and see various types of art, and it's just kind of an interesting cultural experience. I've been around lots of places in Asia, and I've never seen temples quite like this.
Okay. And you say the first temple is Confucius Temple. Are the other 3 something different, or?
Yeah, they are. So these temples, I think, are kind of based off of Taoist style of religion. So based off of lots of different Chinese gods. So I might get these confused, the spring and autumn pagodas, but one of them is a giant statue of Kuan Yu, which is the Chinese god of war. And it's huge. It's 10, 15 feet tall. And not only is the temple itself interesting, but the bridge leading up to it is full of these really artistic statues of various Chinese gods. And once you go inside the temple, there's more art, and you get a beautiful view over the lake. So you get not only this beautiful temple, but you get the scenery is just breathtaking. And then as you move on to the spring pagoda, it's in the shape of a dragon. And as you walk inside, there's another motif of a gallery. And I don't know, I've never really seen such a thing, like such a temple in Asia, where not only is the outside this magnificent kind of Art Nouveau, but on the inside, the way that they tell the story of Kuan Yin, which is the Chinese god of mercy, is done in a really artistic and kind of fascinating way.
And I get the impression from what you're saying that these are not ancient temples, but something built more recently.
Yeah. Taiwan itself, like what we consider Taiwan, is a fairly new country to begin with. Many of the Chinese came there after Mao kind of took over. So
Right, the nationalist Chinese.
yeah, so this is anywhere you go, you'll see things for Chiang Kai-shek, who is kind of the leader of the forces who escaped Mao, and the money and a lot of the governmental buildings and a lot of stamps and such have his face on it. So a lot of the tourist infrastructure got built much later. So even though there's old temples and such, a lot of the things you'll see are newer.
Okay. And so this was built more by the mainland Chinese who came over than by the indigenous Taiwanese or...
Exactly. To my understanding, the indigenous Taiwanese you'll see in the center of the island. So I was not lucky enough to be able to go into the highlands of Taiwan. This is where you'll see a lot of the orchard trees and a lot of the natural beauty of the country. I did more of like a city tour.
Okay.
So, but if you're on the outskirts and you're in these major cities, it is very much a Han Chinese influence, or it's basically the province that's closest to Taiwan, which I think is Fujian.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then after the Lotus Pond, you took us someplace else, and I don't recall where.
Oh, it's called Cijin Island. And when I went to Taiwan, I went basically during New Year's, and I was a little bummed out because I didn't have anybody to travel with. So the lady at the hostel that I stayed at recommended I go to Cijin Island and visit the fish street or rent a bike and travel around the island. And it's a beautiful island. It would have been better in the summertime because you could have gone swimming at the beach. But just renting a bike and taking it around the path, you'll see some more old temples and such, but there's a lot of really cool small food stalls, so you can try various clam soups and things like that. And there's more temples and a lot of like maritime themed attractions. There's a nice lighthouse and such. But really, you're going there to eat. You want to go there for the seafood street.
Okay.
And it was funny because when I went, one thing you got to know about Taiwan is that if you don't speak Mandarin or the local dialect or Hokkien, sometimes things get a little bit challenging. So I was trying to order my dinner, and the guy at the shop was trying to explain to me how to order the fish because it's done by weight. And I was trying to understand him. And things didn't really go back and forth well. And finally, this guy from Seattle showed up who could speak the dialect, and he helped me out. And I ended up having this 6-course meal of red snapper and various shellfish and sea cucumber, and they ended up giving me extra free food because I had bought so much. And it was this wonderful fish meal for only about $20. So that was my New Year's kind of splurge. And what made it so funny is I'm sitting in this little table in the restaurant by myself eating this, mass amount of food. It was a little bit of a glutton experience, but I'm glad I did it because I got to try so many different things. But there's lots of restaurants. They're all kind of the same idea. There's various places selling various types of fish, and you go and you can try sea slugs or various fish or local delicacies like the sea cucumber, and there's shellfish, and you basically buy it based on the weight of the fish.
Okay. Now, you were mentioning that Taiwan had a program targeting backpackers that you took part in. What part of this was facilitated by this program?
Well, essentially the youth hostel that I stayed at was advertised in it because as I traveled around the country, there's not many youth hostels. There's one in Taipei, or one or two in Taipei, 2 in Kaohsiung, and then there's another one in Hualien. But if you go to other parts of the country, you're usually trying to find hotels on your own. Mm-hmm. Or, which I advise if you're a guy or a very adventurous woman, is that you stay in a hero house. So hero houses are hotels that they've converted in Taiwan for the local military to stay in. So young guys when they're traveling, and it's really cheap, and it includes breakfast, and it's a hostel-style dormitory. And all cities will have one of these hero houses. And this was advertised as part of this backpacking program, too. They made these rooms available to foreign travelers.
Oh, interesting.
Through this program. And I think I had some of my best nights in these hero houses because you'd get there and there'd be nobody in the room. And you think, oh, okay, I have the place to myself. And when you come at night, you have 2 guests. And what I think is great about Taiwanese people in general that I've experienced is that they're very, very friendly. But they're also very shy to begin with. So I'm this big, almost 6-foot-tall Caucasian backpacker wandering into my room, and there's 2 Taiwanese soldiers in their boxer shorts, watching TV. And just the look on their face of kind of confusion and fear and how to deal with it is a great way to break the ice, and you kind of have a good friend for the evening.
Okay.
Well, okay, that might have come out funny, but every time this happened, there was always a kind of a 3-step process to meeting a local in the hero houses. First, you'd walk in the door, they'd look at you, you'd look at them. Then you try to speak a little bit of English, and you gauge how well the conversation can go. And then either you will try to become friendly with each other, or you'll just sit there and watch TV. That only happened once, but I think it was really fun one time. We kind of said hello, and then the soldier digged into his backpack and pulled out a heart-shaped chocolate. And he's like, "You want?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "Well, I was so hungry and my girlfriend didn't come." And so it was a great experience where, we're bonding over heart-shaped chocolates because his girlfriend didn't show up to the hotel that night, and we're watching Harry Potter. So I had a pseudo date with a Taiwanese army man that night. And that's kind of how it goes in Taiwan. You never really know what's going to happen. And that's what makes it part of the adventure. The infrastructure is really good, but not many Western tourists go anywhere outside of Taipei or Hualien, from what I understand. So you really are kind of a rarity or a unique experience for the people you're meeting.
Interesting. You talk about that experience. What day stands out for you of the time you spent in Taiwan? What was the best day?
Okay, so one of the reasons that I went to Kaohsiung was to go to this Pure Land Buddhist temple, because in the Lonely Planet, it said that it had an animated Buddha land. And it actually claimed that it was Disney-like. And my undergrad is in East Asian Studies, and the reason I was in Singapore was to get a better understanding of Asian culture and society. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to Taiwan. I'm going to try this backpacker program. I can get a train ticket that will take me 7 stops around the island, and there's an animatronic Buddha land somewhere. I have to see this. So when you get to Kaohsiung, right across from the train station is a bus, and they have a bus that charters to this Pure Land Buddhist temple. And you can get a guide. So I went to the temple. It was really cool because the bus had a couple monks on it, and I got to talk with them. They had been to America and Europe and on various pilgrimages. So I got to hear their side of the story. And then you go to the temple main office, and they'll find someone to be your guide, and they'll take you to the nunneries and where the different monks go to meditate. And then they let me off on my own because I didn't really want to come out and say, hey, I came here to see the Disney-like Buddha land, because I thought, okay, they're going to think another crazy foreigner's come. So I wandered around and I eventually found it, and it was surreal. It really was like singing deers and dancing Buddha kind of things. And I think if you go to Kaohsiung, and the Lotus Pond is beautiful and surreal, and then eating the fish on Cijin Island is great. But going to this Pure Land Buddhist temple, touring around, seeing how the Buddhists live, and then ending up in this enchanted Buddha land part of the temple, just the contrast and the experience itself makes the trip completely worth it.
Very cool. So, and I can't picture this. This is like great moments with Mr. Lincoln turned into great moments with Mr. Buddha. I mean, what exactly are you seeing?
There's a couple rooms. I think it's what it's meant to be is the Buddha's life.
Okay.
So it's different stages of the Buddhist life up until the point where he achieves enlightenment. But then there's animatronic moving animals, and it's done in that like cheery Disney way. So the rooms are in pinks and purples, and it's shiny. So you get burst by colors, and then you get all these strange animatronic interpretations of the Buddha's life.
Okay.
Does this make sense?
I'm following you now, yes.
Okay, sorry.
And what else stands out for you from this part of Taiwan? What surprised you?
How good the sweet potato was. Well, I was walking around Lotus Pond, and there was all these sweet potato vendors, and I've been to Japan and I've been to other parts of Asia where sweet potato is a common snack. But if you go to Lotus Pond, you have to eat the sweet potato. And not only are the sweet potatoes sweet, but the people are sweet. I don't think I've been anywhere else in the world where people are just so nice and so accommodating. And it makes the trip so much better.
Okay. One particular person who stands out for you?
Other than the army guy who shared his heart-shaped chocolate with me?
Well, that's fairly memorable, yes.
There was some guy I met in the city who I was trying to find a movie theater, I think, because there's not that much to do in Kaohsiung at the nightlife point of view. There's a lot of nice night markets. You can go and eat. So I decided I wanted to go see a movie just to kind of break my daily routine. Mm-hmm. And I got lost, and he ended up just putting me on the back of his motorbike and driving me around the city and kind of giving me a pseudo city tour. And I didn't really understand what he was saying because his English wasn't so good and I couldn't understand Mandarin. But that was kind of the highlight of my time in Kaohsiung, is someone actually took the time to show me around the city when they didn't have to.
Excellent. Huh. What do you wish you had known before you went to Taiwan?
What I wish I had known? I wish I had known that how good the food was, because I would have brought bigger pants. Because I think I gained 20 pounds wandering around the country. Because I think traveling as an independent traveler and traveling as somebody with a friend, you tend to do different activities. And I realized that the one thing I loved about Taiwan was the food. And I would wander around the night markets and just try as much as I could. And if I got full, what I would do is I'd buy food and just continue walking until I had a little bit of room in my stomach, and then try what I just bought. Because you get assaulted with so many smells, and there's just so many flavors, and the food regionally is just so good that nothing can stop you from eating.
Now, lots of seafood. Anything particularly that stands out as a dish that you have to try if you're in that area?
If you're in Chiayi, which is the biggest city before Tainan, they have something called turkey rice, and it's really, really good. It's the local specialty of that region. And in a lot of other places in Taiwan, you'll get these vendors with various cuts of meat and vegetables, and you pick the meats you want, you pick the vegetables you want, and they boil them for you. And then they kind of make like a pseudo soup. It's so good. If you find I don't know what's in the broth that they have, but it's almost on every street corner, this type of food. And it's like a makeshift noodle dish. You pick what you want to go inside the soup, and they'll make it for you. But the broth is always fantastic.
Okay. And you say night markets. I'm getting sort of this mental picture of inexpensive food, possibly inexpensive things to buy. If you're sitting down at all, you're sitting on little plastic stools or something, just very low budget, good food.
You're missing one very important thing.
Okay.
Carnival games. There's tons of carnival games.
Ah, okay.
And each city is famous for different night markets. Like in Taipei, there's a famous night market. In Taichung, there's 3 famous night markets. And they seem to be geared towards different people. especially in Taichung, there was a student market, and then there was kind of like a tourist market. And then if you can find the student markets and you don't mind being a little bit of the older person wandering around, I highly advise those ones because there's more food and the energy is very just vibrant.
And student markets, like mostly college students or?
Yeah, they're college students and high school students.
Okay.
Some of them were on dates. Like, it seems to be a place where a lot of kids go for a date. And school's done because Taiwan has a very similar education system to places like Japan where they have to take very hard exams. So people spend all day at school and then, I guess, to unwind, you go to the night market.
Okay. So you talked about not being able to speak the language. When did you feel closest to home? It's really similar. And when did you feel furthest from home?
My family's Italian, so I'm used to that big family feeling. And I noticed that a lot of times, even when you're walking down the street, when I was face to face with like an older lady who was selling something on the street, she reminded me of my nonna, like my Italian grandmother. So she would kind of giggle a little bit and hit you and get you to try things. And it was this family-like encouragement. You have to try this, and if your face goes scrunchy, she giggles and like pats you. It's most places I went in Taiwan, I didn't really feel like I was out of my family.
Interesting. Okay. And how about furthest from home? What was the most foreign experience?
Sometimes being in the train stations are a little bit difficult because the people don't always speak English. So even if you try to get to a little smaller town, like I tried to stop off in Kaohsiung and I wasn't pronouncing it right. So the woman didn't understand. So if you want to have an itinerary, in Taipei Station is where you'll buy your train ticket to take you around the island. Ask the lady there to help you. Write down the stops you want in Chinese characters. And I think that will help you the most because there is a lot of times where you're trying to get from point A to point B or you're trying to ask a question and people might not understand.
Okay. Did you end up pointing out things on the map or how did you eventually get there?
Oh, yeah. I had a Lonely Planet, and in the Lonely Planet, there was a lot of translations from things that were Mandarin to not. But I also have, like, if you have, like, a food preference or something, like, let's say you don't want to eat meat or things like that, that might be a little bit harder, right?
Sure.
And a lot of things do have meat and a lot of things do have seafood. Not that there's no vegetarian meals. Like, when I went to the Buddhist temples, there was a lot of little stalls outside that sold vegetarian noodles.
Right.
But at the night markets, it is, like, meat.
Okay.
And fish. And don't be afraid to try anything because, I don't know, some people get a little bit squeamish about octopus and squid and maybe odd cuts of meat like tripe and such. And a lot of that stuff is at the night market, but it's a good time to try it because you're not spending much money to eat. And you're getting a whole new experience by the way that each stall kind of prepares the dish.
Okay, I was about to say, is there one warning you would give? And then you started listing octopus, squid, and tripe.
Okay, so one man's warning is another man's delicacy.
Is there one warning you would give about Taiwan?
Food-wise is the stinky tofu, which I think the one who talked about Taipei brought that up. There is a type of tofu that smells horrible, and I couldn't try it, and I try anything. But no, I've heard like stories about maybe if you're a girl at night, if you're in a big city, just maybe don't wander down the dark alleys, but that seems to be common sense in almost every country or city you go to. My sister wouldn't go down dark alleys in Toronto. So use common sense.
And I think we should point out you live in Toronto. It's not that you're particularly picking on Toronto there.
No.
Okay.
I did hear a rumor, and I don't know if it's true, but a friend of mine who lived in Taiwan for many years said that if you see the barber, you know that barber shop sign, the white, red, and blue thing that turns around?
Yeah.
It could be like women inside.
Yes, and not women offering haircuts, I think is really what you're
they're
trying
not
to say.
offering you a haircut, and if you can't see inside, like salons, you can see inside. If you see the barber thing and the windows are frosted, yeah, don't go.
Okay.
That's kind of weird advice, but I don't know.
I've heard that before also, so.
Oh.
Okay. As we go to wind this down, if somebody else was going to follow in your footsteps, what other words of advice would you have for them?
My advice to anybody going to Taiwan is spend as much time there as you can. I spent 3 weeks, and when I got into the country, the customs lady almost didn't let me in because it was rare that a traveler would want to stay there the maximum time of their visa. She wanted to see my return ticket and everything. Go to Taipei, get everything prepared, get as many train tickets as you can, get everything written out, and just stop where you can and try everything you can. And trust the people in the train stations who are there for like tourist advice, the tourist stops. They have a lot of good advice and they'll help you to the best of their ability. If you only have so much money to spend, ask them. They will find you an accommodation. Tell them what you want to see. They will help you find it.
Okay. As you think back of your trip, say 1 to 3 images that just really stick with you. Pictures in your head of Taiwan, Southern Taiwan especially.
The temple with the Buddha land has a giant statue of the Amida, the Pure Land Buddha. And whenever I think of Southern Taiwan, I think of this giant golden Buddha. I also think of just the night market that I went to next to my hostel had the best squid. So I can picture squid on a stick, like grilled squid on a stick.
Okay.
Sorry, most of my images are going to be food. And
you said 20 pounds. That's okay. We understand.
And the last image would probably be just that fish street in Cijin Island. I've never seen, like even Chinatown in Toronto where they have the live fish outside that you can choose that's going to be dinner. The variety was huge, and just the amounts and the possibility. You can try so many interesting things.
Okay. And then one thing that made you laugh and say, only in Taiwan.
Just how you can archetype people to what you think they're going to be. Like, my image of a soldier is like a very disciplined and stern man, and the soldiers I met were always the most friendly. And people, even if they look like they shouldn't be approached, the person who looks the scariest is always going to be the nicest.
Okay. Last 2 questions. And you know what they're coming. You really know you're in Southern Taiwan when what?
When you can see the sun rise over Lotus Pond and the outline of the spring and autumn pagodas are in the sunlight.
Okay. And then you know the last question. If you had to summarize Southern Taiwan in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Holy,
Holy? Okay.
relaxing,
Okay.
and delicious.
Oh, thanks very much, Michael, for coming on and sharing with us your trip to Taiwan. No, you don't have a website, right?
No, I don't, but I do have a Twitter account that if people want to follow me, it's perfect, at Sonchi, Sonchy.
Great. So if people have any questions about their trips to Taiwan, I'm sure you'd be glad to answer.
I'd be more than happy to.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
No problem, Chris.
In news of the community, I've been asking people for some time if they could do an iTunes review of the show because that helps me get new viewers. So I thought I'd read some of the more recent iTunes reviews and see if you agree. This one's titled One of the Best, great resource for travel planning and for those stuck between vacations who need a little inspiration. And then from February 20th, a must for travelers. While it isn't possible for most of us travel addicts to view all of the places we want, this podcast is the next best thing to actually getting out on the road. The 2 podcasts about travel inspired my own trip there last year. While it says amateur in the title, the quality of this podcast in sound and editing are anything but amateurish. Unlike many podcasts, this one is expertly edited and a real pleasure to listen to. Thanks so much. And then this one just really warmed my heart. Best travel podcast so far by Rachel. I absolutely love this podcast. There's so many episodes and there isn't a place I've wanted to go that wasn't an episode for. I'm only 14 and still too young to travel on my own. So this podcast helps to imagine the countries I'm interested in and think of what I will do once I'm old enough to travel. The interviews are personal in some parts and almost every person interviewed has some interesting stories. Thanks so much to all of you who have taken the time to write a review for the show. With that, we'll end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. I would be interested if you also would write a review of the show if you like it. These were all 5-star reviews, and all of the most recent reviews were 5-star reviews, and thank you all so much for that. If you have comments, you can also leave them on this episode at amateurtraveler.com or drop me an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. Remember, over on the Facebook community, I'm giving away free stuff. I'm giving away books for people who are willing to write a review of them or iPhone apps and the like. So check out the community at facebook.com/amateurtraveler. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Got to see one more.